Hello, dear people. How are you? Welcome back to another episode of our great podcast. Today we have a bit of a personal and slightly odd subject. Um, yes, and I think this is a very specific topic because I think there are very few topics that artists cover that are so intertwined with the individual and the subjective, the political and the economical and the social as food is. It's a topic that concerns everyone and touches upon everything, and the repercussions of or the implicitness of our habits has a much larger impact than I think most of the people contemplate upon.
I guess we could almost say that it's an easy implication to overlook in everyday life, in some instances, dependent on your surroundings.
Yes, very much so. And I think, I was thinking about uh, food. Oh, it has been done. Because I was speaking like a while ago, a couple of months, well, maybe not a couple of months, maybe last year. I was speaking with a friend of mine who was working within the scope of art, and we were discussing some ideas. And that was this dimension, oh, it has already been done. But I think creating art is not about what has been done. I think a lot of artists have a very strong urge to cast light upon different topics within the world that contribute on a very large scale to the world being as it is. And I think a lot of people have need to rectify that. So it's not about which art has been done, but what we have learned from it.
I also think that it's not an expression I like. I think that it has been done, because things being done, it's so much wider and there's so many more discussions than that. Just because a topic has been talked about doesn't mean that there's nothing else to say, different angles, different personal relations to that topic. So I think this is not a topic that has been exceeded at all.
No, I don't think so, and not in the scope, not within the context of its importance. And I think that's what becomes quite often neglected. It is the impact of this particular topic. But before we go there, let's start with saying a bit about this work. And I know that you were a bit surprised when I showed you this particular series. And I know I was as well, but I was surprised out of different reasons.
Well, how should I formulate it? I've been knowing you for probably 12 years when you started undertaking this journey. And from everything I know about you and had learned up until then, this wasn't necessarily the direction I expected that it would take. And I thought that it was much more likely that you would go in a more fine art or abstract direction. So yeah, this definitely took me by surprise. Joyfully surprised, but by surprise.
You laughed. You like it?
Oh, I enjoy this a lot. It's an absurd piece that makes me laugh. I know that there's a lot more underlying, and it's not just a happy piece. But the the sort of interesting thing about this, knowing what I know about it, is that when you walk in and you it's hard and look at it for the first time. It's hard not to smile and to like sense a bit of the absurdity of it. And yeah, at least my reaction is that it makes me smile.
Thank you. You see, there is a very strong thing that Christian is saying there, that you thought that I would go much more into the direction of fine art. And a bit of background story to this, that if one kind of thinks about the journey that I have accounted for, the one that kind of takes you through the refugee camp and through the war and through a lot of other things, I've always learned how to be serious. You know, if it's a bit funny because I think that there are very few roles. Like if one watches movies, I think the role that I have naturally inherited has been usually the one played by male protagonists. You know, like dark, mysterious, um, very serious, very serious. And since my whole life, the only topics that I have ever been surrounded for have been of the quite serious nature, from politics to everything that kind of that brings about. Also, my mother being neurologist and psychiatrist, so that meaning that everything has been accounted for through understanding the meaning attached to that.
And could we also maybe say that you are, as a natural result by that, you probably found yourself underneath the magnifying glass a bit more than perhaps what is usually perceived by children growing up?
Definitely, and also I don't think that my Virgo, my Leo Virgo cusp with Moon in Capricorn makes this any more divergent. Doesn't allow the story to diverge in a different direction. So in the context of what we're speaking about is that I've learned many things throughout this life, many bizarre things, but I've never learned how to be fun. I never learned how to have humor, and I've never learned how to deal with humor. Which is kind of bizarre when you think about it, but I think that a lot of people in the West really never contemplate upon the dimension of freedom and ability to immerse oneself in the fantastical narrative that has been created through capitalism in a way. Just for the sake of, like, I mean, obviously you've grown up in rural Norway, so this potentially does not apply to you in that sense. But I think like what struck me most when I came to Norway, but also when I came to England, is that, or when you're faced with the American culture through TVs, is that there is very high level of immersion with the toys, like ginormous teddy bears, a lot of princessy stuff, Lego not being hyper expensive, etc., etc. So you kind of had, maybe it was expensive in Norway.
Definitely expensive, but still something that you will find in most homes.
Exactly. So, but that was never available or attainable to me. Uh, just given the just given the narrative. And when I became an artist, as we have already spoken about, my first inclinations were towards that serious art and like those dimensions, those profound dimensions. And don't misunderstand me, fundamental questions are something that is a core in at my own core, and that is what has also propelled me to write a book and do a lot of different things. However, when I was contemplating upon what I can do with, like, what type of art do I want to, not what the type of art I want to create, it wasn't about that. But as my life was kind of falling into pieces and everything that I worked very hard for not has not given the fruits that I expected it to. Um, wait, what did I want to go with this? Where did I go? Sorry, remind me.
Well, I am also waiting for where you want to go with this. We are speaking about
Oh,
how
yes,
your lack
yes.
of
I'm sorry.
fun
I'm
in your
sorry.
childhood.
Yes, exactly. So I kind of never. So I suddenly had this space where I could have my own conversations with the universe. And then I understood that these topics that I was kind of banging on in the beginning, that they were important, but I've never learned how to be fun. I never learned how to be frivolous. I never learned how to have fun. So when art kind of became that space where I allowed myself to do whatever I want, I took this direction. And for somebody who's as serious as me, that was, I think, a very interesting
It was maybe
move.
something that you yourself didn't expect as well. It was something that you discovered during the explorations that you were undertaking.
Exactly. And another thing was also that when I started working with art, it's very safe to say that I was completely blocked. I was the way I have come through a lot of things that I've come through is because I've had high ability for imaginatory immersion. I have a very vivid mind and I have a head that connects with a very high speed. So everything that I've ever done, fashion included, has been through means of understanding the flow and kind of incorporating this dimension of love within that. And because of that, I was never out of ideas. I was never like I've always understood how to navigate whichever direction, whatever happened to me, in one way or the other. So when I started doing art, which was I was supposed to do exactly what I loved, and that was being free, because ultimately for me, becoming an artist was about freedom. So when that dimension kind of surfaced, I found myself in an opposite camp. I became petrified, like utterly petrified. And it's not. And now we're laughing, but that was not funny. That was really not funny. I could stand like literally in front of the canvas for hours and days, and I would cry, and I couldn't move. I literally could not move. Although I had sketches, I knew how I wanted to do things, but there was this dimension where I was so terrified of a result going of a lot of things that I couldn't create what I wanted to create. So I kind of that in combination with the fact that I kind of acknowledge that I've never learned how to loosen up or just have fun with anything, kind of brought about this series of works that were within the same dimension as Snickels. They are absurd. They speak about other concepts other than just being a pure pun, but they also like they're very complex pieces, because on one side this whole series ended up being about food, and that was not an intention at all, nor did I look at it as such. um
But these are the things that you discover during your process and during your work with them, and when you're building relationship with the works, and then this has surfaced during and afterwards.
well, they've surfaced in a bit different way, because I used to, I mean, I still do. I am absolutely obsessed with post-internet culture. Um, and I think looking through a lot of the images of utter absurdity that people have kind of posted online has brought back some faith into humanity. Because I have to say, upon coming to London, I kind of lost it completely. And just looking through these images and seeing what type of humor and what type of this is before Instagram exploded with all the cutesy animal photos and everything that you see. So this is like 2 years before like COVID we're speaking about. And these works kind of came about a year before COVID. So I was looking through those images, and it was really interesting because the post-internet humor, the weird core, has this dimension of utter absurdity, yet it's constantly referencing I will almost call it post-contemporary narrative. And what I like about these pieces, first and foremost, like how they became into being, is that I was kind of looking at the age that we're living in, and it really struck me that we are living in a phase transition. And phase transition is something that I speak a lot about in my book as well. This dimension where we have not finished a chapter, and the new one we have just started to kind of have an overview of. So what is happening right now, this age that is semi-digital, semi-analog, is a very fascinating one, because like I'm seeing a lot of art being created in the context of post-internet, but also like a lot of digital art. But I think what we kind of are really tend to forget is that we live in an age where we don't belong in either camps. And I think that's what's golden about it. I think that's what's so gorgeous about it, that we don't belong to the digital world. Most of us are not digital natives. And then, but at the same time, we don't belong to the old school either, nor will we ever. So Snickels is a bit of amalgamation also, that like being an internet phenomenon, like because translated onto analog work on canvas, that kind of really speaks something interesting about this dimension of transfer from one side to the other. And that's how the series kind of came about. And Snickels, Fluff, and Salmonella, so those are three pieces that refers that you're laughing. What are you laughing of?
No, it's just strong names for the Star series.
Yeah, I mean, this is so funny. Like, I take my humor. I was about to say I take my humor seriously, but
And I can also remember the process of them being created. So yeah,
Jesus, it took me forever. But these are my first.
it wasn't meant to take you forever. They were meant to be some quick works that you just wanted to do to sort of have these out of your system, and they kept on going and going, and it went into, how many did you say? 5 to 7 works?
Yeah, 5 to 7 works. And these are very, very fascinating for me. Because my initial intention was highly connected to just letting go and having fun. And if you kind of see this canvas, you can see that it is about that. I mean, these are such complex pieces. I think the most complex pieces I've created. But let me turn around for a second. So you have canvas, like it's gray, and then I didn't want to be I didn't want them to be perfect. I think at that point in time I was much more concerned with, like, it's a very odd time in my life, because I've just stopped being a dentist like a year and a half before we came to London, and suddenly I am an artist. But what I wanted to say within that dimension is that as a dentist in the office that I worked with, we were quite a busy one, and we were so short of staff. That means that dentists that were available would work quite a lot, and I used to have between 10 to 14 patients within the scope of 7.5 hours, 8 hours, which is quite a lot. So I've learned to work with this absolutely bizarre pace. I was yes.
Could we also maybe say that that is a very precise occupation? Like, there's not that much room for you to be offhand.
Exactly. I mean, in many ways, like, me becoming a dentist is also one of those weird twists of fate where you kind of have to laugh about it. But being a dentist meant that I was hyper precise, and also I have learned to immerse myself in the flow that has allowed me to work at a very high pace, but with a high amount of accuracy. And coming to London, where everything exists on much slower level, especially the higher up one comes, has kind of established this dimension where I came with so much energy and such intensity and such capacity to work at high pace. And it felt like coming to London kind of did not, like, that energy did not fit with how London works. So I felt very trapped by that amount, because I felt very trapped. So I wanted to pour out this energy, because, like, if you think about going back to me I've been psychoanalyzed and dealt with psychoanalysis since I was little. So that means that I understood that every single conversation that any of us have, mine, yours, his. No, actually, I'm not sure who you're talking to, but, like, you're having a cool one. But we have everything that happens is never between you and another person. It's between you and the universe, in a way. So I utilized art within that specter to try to attempt to find my coordinates again, because I understood that whatever is put on canvas and however it's being put is my own, is part of my own conversation. Although that wasn't as apparent to me, like at that point, because not all, when going to Rome, sometimes it's not clear that that's where you're going. So this canvas is a work where I have not planned it too much. I've had a sketch or two, and I had idea of how to do it, and then I started. It wasn't. It was meant for me to just pour out my energy and.
But you did do some very specific choices when you started with this. For instance, the Snickels itself is made to sort of stand out from the canvas.
Yes, and I think Snickels is made like the representation of Snickels is made in an acrylics impasto, and then it was painted over with oil, and it sticks out from canvas. And what it's kind of beautiful to me is that this initial shape. Initially, I was not actually capable. Like I wasn't capable of painting in depth, and I think kind of going back to eyes. Like my eyes, like just because of how my sight is, I have not. I have very. It appears that I have very flattened experience of the world compared to.
So you experienced a lot of challenges with getting this in-depth look of it compared to how you normally perceive things.
Perceive the world. It's not about that, but I used acrylic impasto because I thought that it will allow me to create texture that would lessen the pressure when it came to really painting this in order for it to exist within this 3D dimension. And that did not pan out completely. I still had to paint it how it did, and it took me forever to learn how to do it, especially the caramel. I mean, caramel is so delicious and luscious. I'm so proud of it. Like I'm looking at it now. I'm like, I love this caramel. I absolutely adore it. But if you kind of look at here, well, we can't see it from this distance, but hopefully you'll be able to see it in a gallery at one point. Is that the caramel was much broader. There was much more of it. And then as I was painting, I instead of sanding the background of it and changing and creating a completely smooth surface, because that's what you do when you make a mistake in oil painting. You sand it and then you start over again. I mean, there are different techniques how to do it, but with the acrylic impasto, you definitely need to do that. But
so you consciously wanted to leave the trace of what had been done before on this one.
Exactly, and this dimension of tracing is that exactly what kind of brings us back to this narrative of food, because food, like I never intended to create a series about food, but then I was looking at my 7 canvases I've made, and I was thinking, okay, these are all about food, and obviously, if I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the first episode, but in the context of post-war and after that assault, I developed a very dissonant relationship with my body, and with it quite heavy eating disorder that has been left untreated for until I came to London. And it is also it is something that I've hid from everybody, my parents including, for a very long time. I mean, until quite recently. So it is interesting that this dimension of mimetics that kind of surfaced in my work without me actually intentionally wanting to create my work about this. Yeah.
Could we say that you were also going through a process So you said it went untreated, but during this time in your life, you were actually doing quite a lot yourself to treat this. So it almost seems like your subconsciousness in some way have had a conversation about this that has then been expressed on the canvas without you really being fully aware of it.
I think, but that's the thing. Like, this is what I said, that, like, given in the context that my mother was a neurologist and psychiatrist, and I always understood that every conversation we have is the one with the universe. I understood that, like, you can utilize. Like, I was always hyper aware of my surroundings and myself within the context. So when I started doing art, it was under the parameter of me, under the paradigm of utter freedom. And it's very interesting, exactly what you're saying, that my mind, without me actually intending, went there. However, this being about food has created a space for me and for us to speak about something that you and me are very highly concerned about. And it's very beautiful to me to see how this, like, individual, the social, kind of intertwine one into another, and how it flows into a piece which is seemingly um, low or bad art, in the sense that it's not a perfect oil painting. And also you can say that, you can even say that the question of portrayal is, you wouldn't deem it to be such a serious piece from the first outlook.
I think the perfection of, or the imperfection of it, as you called it, there is very in line with the theme overall that it partially addresses, because the imperfections in it reflects the food industry. The food industry is made to be this very glossy, perfect. Like, have you ever seen a commercial of a hamburger that doesn't look perfect? And you don't need to do a lot of investigation to find out that most of the ingredients that's used on that hamburger isn't even edible. There's done so much to tweak it and to change your expression. So you have this entire dimension already baked into this, where you have the imperfections hidden around in it that is visible, and for the, you don't need to be trained to necessarily see it. It's left so that everyone can enjoy this dissonance happening in it, but you need to pay attention to see it, but you also need to understand that it is there in order to show these things. And then you have the glossy, more beautiful object on top of it that is like what you are presented with, which is this presumably nicely packed good for you dish that is then set out for you to take without looking deeper.
Yeah, I mean, so in the context of my own transcendence, because I was so tired of being, like, I've been living in this state of, like, high dissonance, where I knew there was no rules and I knew you could fly however you wanted, but at the same time I was quite anchored by my own body. And not my own, it's not just about my body that has kept me, but this fact that I have worked out throughout my whole life, like, and worked out hard, like, you can vouch for some of it.
We are talking about you having a dissonance with your body and the transformative actions you did to try to end up in what, in how you depicted yourself.
Well, within the sphere where I was recognizing my own expression in the mirror, and I think that's kind of like the interesting dimension. But what has happened is that no matter how much I was exercising, and I would run on a treadmill for an hour, I would go walks for 4 hours in mountains, and you can say, and also my food intake was hyper restricted, and yet it wouldn't let go. And that's the interesting, that's why we're kind of speaking about this. And I think it kind of really neatly connects to this piece being created in acrylics and then painted over with oil, so you have something inorganic, something that is not edible, kind of being mixed with the organic and presentable. But what I mean to say is that my body just wouldn't let go, and that gonna completely. I think upon coming to London, it just really just threw me off because I was working so hard and then nothing was happening until I completely changed my diet some 2 3 years ago. I became a complete vegan. However, and obviously some changes did happen, but we're speaking about hyper restricted diet. However,
I also think it's interesting to say that before transgressing into veganism, which we think is not necessarily the right choice for everyone, we think it's dependent on body type and how your body feels.
I'm
But
sorry, vegetarian, not vegan. But continue.
but 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 for the investigations that we went through, that was the direction that your body started reacting to and felt more correct for you. And also another
But
important thing about it is that we also went back to eating very unprocessed.
yes, but that's the thing. So like 3 years ago, I really changed my diet and became vegetarian. And again, it was a hyper restricted amount of food that I would eat. But the biggest change happened when you stumbled upon medical medium and you introduced me to medical medium.
Well, I've had this tendency throughout our life, haven't I, to stumble upon things in regards to our habits regarding foods. It's quite amusing actually, because we have tried a lot of different varieties throughout, and from our friends and family, it is always perceived like it's your idea.
Of course,
Even though even though it's I who find and invent and always talk you into all of my new ideas of what I want to test out next.
yeah, but but even that is also such an interesting topic because usually in a relationship, if drastic food changes occur, one usually presumes, or at least from the environment we come from, that it's the girl that is the woman that is inciting that change. But in this case, it has never. I mean, I don't think I like just again giving the comprehension, the Serbian comprehension of how one is dealing with food and how food is looked upon. I don't think I would have ventured into so many interesting spheres. I mean, we've tried blood type diet. We have tried fair amount of things here and there. But I think what I want to speak to you about is the change that has happened after I was introduced to medical medium. And I think he has a couple of books, and they all start with drinking celery in the morning, and then you have the different dimensions and the different aspects of detox detox that's gonna come about. And I think until I've done the detox for almost, well, not for almost, for a full year, and throughout a lot of foods such as eggs, for example, or and yes, just a lot of added, like a lot of food that could contain
Additives and taste enhancers and all of these types of artificially produced products.
yeah, I'm sorry people, I'm a bit off because like it's a bit of a difficult topic for me to speak about, and yet it's a topic that I'm very concerned about because I don't think I would have believed a lot of things that are being like the way we deal with food and a lot of different things that we are a bit like, yeah, we know it's like that, we know it's a bit like this or like that or bad or etc etc, but we actually don't know how bad things are until we've gone if until one actually does a full detox over a longer time. So
I
I
want to
have been, yeah.
I want to chime in there a bit because I feel it's actually important to emphasize that there's a lot of detoxes out there and all detoxes aren't made similar.
No,
This is surface level, very mild detox. It's not something extreme that you do for 2 weeks to give you the feeling that you have done something
no.
and now everything will change. This is a long term investment. And I don't think it's too important what's your source and what you're using. I think it's more the fundamental principles that's important. And that is that you over time remove all of these unfamiliar new chemicals that has been introduced to the human body over the last 100 to 200 years throughout our extremely quick development, especially within chemistry and food production and industry. And this leads to our bodies, who have been developed over millions of years, suddenly being faced with all of these new chemicals that is not used to having to process. It wouldn't naturally occur in nature, which means that what this system is doing for you is that it is over time, of course, trying to avoid reintroducing these pollutants, but it is also helping your body with getting rid of them, so that your
But
liver, spleen, all filter systems in your body's kidneys
yes,
work
because that's
optimally.
what thing was about. My body was so condensed, um, and so full of chemicals, because a lot of like, this is a very difficult topic for everyone, but I think that like, I'm not sure how bodily dissonance, how it has for how long it has existed within our male counterparts, and how it has developed, or if it's a more recent phenomenon. But women have always had traditionally quite ornamental role, where the aesthetics and the appearance have been the leading paradigm when it comes to defining one's worth. And for the last 20, 30 years, I mean, from Twiggy era from until now, we've had a very rigid body image imposed on a female body, where extreme starvation has been introduced. And it's interesting to thinking about it, like, there is like this bizarre religious aspects to it, where the female body has been kind of almost penalized through means that its worth is only achieved through quite severe asceticism. And so a lot of women that I know of, and that have kind of come to know throughout fashion, or just through my life, just even in our dentist office back in Norway, we were 10 to 12 people, I think, mostly women. And a lot of us used sodas to curb hunger. And that's where things kind of starting to get both closer to the epicenter of what we want to speak about, but also closer to what I'm trying to say. And that is that through different appetite suppressants, through sodas, through a lot of things that are being utilized in food in order to restrict calories, but at the same time give one experience of satisfaction, have put a lot of odd things in their body. I mean, male have put a lot of odd things in their body, but that's a bit of a different discussion. I can't speak for the experiences I don't have, but I can speak to you about my experience. So through this ability to kind of try to hold down the amount of calories, etc., etc., I personally have introduced so many chemicals into my body that my body did not actually have a processing capacity. And that's why medical medium becomes quite important here.
And could I add on that I also think that most of the people that is on this treadmill through life, where they're trying to restrict, they're trying to choose all of these products who are supposedly ticking off all the right boxes, it's low in fat, it's low in calorie, it's low in everything, which then can be consumed in huge quantities, combined with everything from smoking to sodas to chewing gum, which is all there to repress hunger in a way, leads you into this bad cycle where your body, even if you're actually taking in less calories, let's say that you're on something like between 800 to 1200 calories a day on this diet, even though you're still on that, your body probably don't have the ability to actually have that calorie deficiency and utilize it to get rid of anything, because its filtration systems doesn't work. It's stagnated.
exactly. And that's the thing. Like, we're kind of going back to the I was blocked. And that's exactly what is happening because, and I look at it in through this way. In on one sense, for example, if I ate dinner, I would have absolutely extreme and excruciating cravings after every single meal, like absolutely excruciating, um, which would not subside unless I've had soda or something sweet, which again kind of defies the whole point in many ways. So you would have that, and then on the other side, also like when we came to London, I started smoking, and obviously my eating disorder also escalated again, which led to my muscles in the stomach cramping. So my solar plexus being so stiff that when I went to the doctor once for something completely different, uh, he was quite surprised that my stomach was as such as it was. Uh, and this is a bit before, just before London. I thought it was just because of exercise, but it wasn't exactly like that. And the third thing is that we, like, human beings don't think about the micro narrative at all. In the sense that if you take antibiotics, you take one tiny pill, and within the tiny pill, it's probably 1/10 of it that is the active ingredient. So, and I'm saying 1/10 just to be on a generous side, it's usually much less. So if you think about that, how little of a substance can impact your body, you can kind of start to imagine what all of these chemicals that our bodies have developed through 3 billions of years. They've had the ability to live in us in a symbiosis with nature and what is provided within in nature for us to evolve and exist. And the introduction of all the chemicals has really led to a divergence in the evolutionary path, I think, which is going to be interesting to see how it develops. But if your body is blocked, is exposed to all of these chemicals that it can't process, it can't digest, it can't do anything about, and your whole body is spazzing out because the overflow of such is beyond its capacity to eliminate, then we have a global problem.
I think that is already evident with like we do have the increase in weight pandemic that is becoming more and more evident throughout the world, which I personally think has a lot to do with with the quality of food and the additives that we put into it. I think that has a much more to do with it than is actually presented. Um,
But it's also that we're kind of approaching the subject here because my challenge wasn't that I was not disciplined enough. I mean, sure, obviously, well, also in a bit of a different context, but I'll come back to that. But my challenge was the fact that all of the factors that have kind of I've been exposed throughout my life, and also my genetical predisposition. Don't misunderstand me. And well, genetical predisposition, but also the nurture environment, so environment I was exposed to, has led to my metabolism being so slow that was not being effective in getting rid of anything.
let's just
And
say
that's
that
what we're discussing. That's why we have, like, I think that's one of the main reasons why we have the weight pandemic, as you said. I think people's metabolism has slowed down to such an extent that we can't process anymore.
yes, the recommendation of let's say 2000 calories in average for a female, most female bodies aren't able to stay at a stationary state with those calories with most diets that exists today, even though if they are between 1500 to 2000. And it's once again back to everything we're speaking about. I just want to bring that a bit back to the Snickels, because this is one of the things that I've always been thinking about when seeing the Snickels, and that is that I like that you have these pickles that on surface level is unhealthy option of a food. It's at least a vegetable. And then you have this hidden underneath. You have this cube of course, what is something that is fetishized by many and is something that is appreciated by many. We have this cube of sugar, chocolate, caramel inside. But I like this. I like this side of it where you have the unknown inside that you cannot really know until you look deeper or actually have tried it, and
Yeah, you
then you will
can't count
discover
for it.
this underlying component in it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, I really enjoy your interpretation here because I have to say that I have not conceived of it as such. There is this.
Of course, you have. You've created it.
Well, but that's the thing. We don't know everything. We shouldn't know everything, and we should not. Curiosity can kill the cat. But I think that what we're dealing with today is something so serious and so grave that I don't think there's enough art about food, because what we're dealing here is a poisoning on a global level, and we're dealing with a poisoning on a global level that we have all accepted and said that we it's fine for us to be exposed to that, and I think that's so utterly bizarre.
I also would like to add, though, that we do have the economical and political side of this as well, because we're not going to solve this today and we're not going to bring all the solutions to this issue, but there is a huge issue that organic food is more expensive than non-organic food. It is such a commitment for a family to afford and even put the energy into acquiring and making sure that you know all of these things. Like, we have governments that should in theory be there to sort of take care of these things. It shouldn't be up to every family to be their own experts whether or not the food that is being presented to them is something you can eat or not.
I think that's very interesting because now you're talking about the level of governance and the not the well, the silent contract that one makes with one's own government and state and the global forces, but that's a bit of a different topic. But what I'm fascinated with is that we're the only species that has managed to poison their own drinking water. I mean, there is no point of return. Like, I don't think that most people actually understand what does it mean to introduce microplastic to water. That means that build up of it within the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system, so the system that essentially is responsible for allowing for processing of information within your own body, and that brings nutrients to the mind and takes away the and detoxifies, so takes away the
Waste product.
waste products. Thank you. Oh my god, you're reading my mind. I love that. Waste products is hindered to function optimally, and not just hindered, it's completely obstructed and will continue to be obstructed. So this suddenly you will probably be looking at a rise in a lot of interesting diseases that we did not think.
I don't think you will be stepping too much out of bounds if you say that probably a lot of the diseases that we've already experiencing is a direct result of this.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, most definitely. But I'm also thinking about like heart attacks.
Which has been on a rise.
Yeah, exactly. Cardiovascular clogs and a lot of different things that I mean, we have introduced for you, and then like the reaction on foreign bodies within your own body. I mean, that's a whole dimension there to unpack, because how we deal with food is one of the most interesting dimensions that runs parallel to our own apprehension of value and of human life, and not only human life within the scope of what other people perceive as a value of a life, but also how we treat our bodies is very closely related to how we perceive our own worth. And food is very difficult. Like, it's a very difficult topic. And I was thinking about the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, where you have this generational dimension where the mother is also well, you have the donut obviously, and then you have the mother that is being quite critical about her daughter's weight. And I was thinking about that because obviously that situation is quite familiar to me, but I understand both the mother and the girl because in today's world we have been brought up on highly processed food. For example, in Serbia, um, it was around the 80s. So when Coca Cola became big there, it was a status thing. Like you were considered quite wealthy if you could afford that every single day, and
Um,
we were quite fine off. So that was something that was always present, and in the context of a lot of like Serbian cuisine being quite heavy on dough, on cheese, on curd meats, like on all of these things that are quite fatty. But then in the context of constant introduction to sodas, like my body early enough was not able to process on any
it creates a
yeah.
concoction that doesn't build up a healthy metabolic system and a healthy human body by having the constant exposure to these very bad reactors put together.
Exactly. So you kind of have that you don't know, like a lot of girls that have bodily issues in that direction of kind of being larger than they're comfortable with, don't even understand what's happening because they are doing a lot of right things now, but they actually do not have like, I don't think that if I didn't do the whole medical medium cleanse, I don't think that I would have myself understood how hindered our metabolism has become through the substances that we have introduced to our bodies through means of food. And it's a like it is a regulated field, but we know that as with everything, like just kind of looking at oxycontin and how that kind of went, that it took, or lead poisoning, that's also a topic that we can discuss of.
I think the biggest things that is lead is definitely a big one, but I think we're all fairly familiar right now with at least how the smoking campaign was and how many years it actually took to just get to the place where you can legally put on a package of cigarettes that this is actually harmful to you. Because the tobacco industries bought scientists, they put out this information, and this is this is all known now, and if we are that naive that we think this only happens in the tobacco industry, that this isn't a common tactic within a lot of industries, then we are having a bit of a naive approach to it.
Mm.
So we cannot really trust the system of governance when it comes to these things, unfortunately. Because as you said with lead as well, I can't remember how many parts it is, but for a long time it was said to be like a safe limit. You could be
Oh
exposed
yeah.
to this tiny amount of lead. So it could be some tiny amounts in drinking water and other things. And now they're starting to realize that it's something that the human body should just never have.
Yeah, I mean, lead is hyper poisonous, but also we can address this dimension where it took 25 years, despite all the evidence, to start.
You're talking about the removal of lead from petrol now. That the thin layer around the earth of that came from lead being used in petrol for a 25 to 30 year period, and they had to
Yeah, but
fight it for that long time before they actually got rid of it.
yes, but for example, like do you remember that there was a Norwegian kindergarten that needed to be moved because they found lead in the soil?
No, it's not uncommon in
Yeah.
any place that if for children who play outside, there is this layer from I'm not fully sure about this, but 70s, 80s, that layer of earth that is there has lead in it.
And that
Because the entire atmosphere on Earth was full of lead due to all the cars that had it in their petrol.
petrol, exactly. So we were speaking. We were like, as you said it very well. I think for a very long time, we the governance has been executed by higher organs that society has attribute has allowed has delegated some credence to, and you kind of come around and with the social media and everything, like uh, you understand that we can't be naive anymore. We literally cannot be naive, because what is apparent is that there very obviously there are individuals that are fighting for the world that should be, but most of the governing organs do not have your best interest.
Well,
They don't.
we can say that, but it's also not the most effective way to regulate it, because a government agency is never the quickest. You never have a quick and swift result unless something is of a very grave severity, and we can always say that this is, but the issue with food is that it takes time,
Yeah.
and you can always come up with some. It's very easy to also pick apart a study that is done, because it is so hard to isolate and actually come down to the sources. So you could always say that not enough research and resources are put into coming up with actually clean and redundant studies that aren't done by someone who already have that isn't being paid for,
Yeah,
with
like
someone
vested
who have an
interest.
interest in the study, and where we can actually get some results that we can trust, because it's fairly clear as well, without going too much out of topic, that the food model that came from the US in the after war years is completely based on what production had been ramped up throughout the war, and that was just made so they could sell American products.
Yeah,
And
and
the
here,
entire world has been using that food models for the next 40 to 50 years.
yeah, and here comes kind of the thing. Like we're fighting, we're fighting. Um, there is a lot of substances that are illegal because of the adversary effects they have on the human mind and the body, especially in the context of dependency and how do you call that? Oh my god, my mind went blank a bit. Um,
I'm not sure, but that again
like
is
the different word for depend, addicted,
uh,
addiction. So in the context of addiction, but the way food functions, especially highly processed food, is that they are hyper poisonous and they're hyper addictive, and they create this very strong emotional bond where we can't actually talk about food, because we can't talk about the human body. The human body is only to be talked through certain ways and channels, which are contingent upon the subjective individual apprehension of their own narrative. And I mean, for everyone here, included myself, even you, and I would say even you, because you're the only, like, you're one of those few people that one knows that have very strong reaction to a lot of substances that you would, they're harmful for the body. So you would never, you never like dairy. You have a difficult relationship. I mean, you don't have difficult relationship. That's, you have funny relationship with fat on ham once upon a time when we used to eat meat. But
yeah, you could say I don't enjoy fat in general. Like olive oil is fine, but that's as far as I will go.
yeah, but I mean, you would cut out with surgical precision the small fat pieces around the ham. Like, you would not touch any of that. You also don't like sugar. You like some baked things, but you don't enjoy chocolate. You don't enjoy ice cream. Like, all of those things that are hyper addictive for the human mind and are harmful for both the mind and body. You don't have that. You don't have that addictive relationship to that. So I think that's very fascinating for me, because I've grown up in an environment where, and also food is very difficult. For example, like you and me have such a different upbringing within those two contexts, because in Serbia, the relationship with food is a very inflamed thing. And I was recently there for a funeral, and my veganism has definitely been discussed, and people have tried to push a lot of meat on me, which
Which is
becomes.
interesting in this day and age, since veganism has really broken through some boundaries.
But it's not all. It's not about that. It's about the respect for the personal choices. So in Serbia, food culture has been very highly developed, and it's looked upon as a token of love, whether you want it or not. So you're constantly ushered into eating and eating and eating, because every rejection of food, especially if you are coming to visit, is hurtful act that
It is
is.
seen as disrespectful towards the host, or that the host isn't seen as adequate if you aren't enjoying what they are putting forth,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, but if it's disrespect, that would be one thing, but it becomes this hyper personal and again hyper inflammated question, where it's not only the rejection of whatever it is, it's the rejection of pure love. So I've, for example, been brought up in a family where not eating when things are served to you is it's a minefield. While
Yes, and that,
you have not, like, you've grown up in an environment. Norway, I'm sorry, Norway does not press food on you. People have their own opinions and people can discuss, but nothing of the sorts that I've
it
experienced.
isn't as deeply ingrained. It is based on other things. It is more based on the investment that has been done in the food through making it and through purchasing it more than anything else. Like that, there's no wish to waste it,
Yeah.
but I would say that that doesn't normally mean that you should overeat, but you need to plan out what you put on your plate in a way. But
Yeah, but also, like, when we came to Norway, I remember, like, we were just very surprised and shocked about how much vegetables you were eating, and you were drinking water, and you were eating porridge, and you were eating white bread. Like, I grew up in a family, and
you
again,
meant you meant grained bread.
grain bread. So like, I grew up with drinking Coca-Cola, and like that's completely normal. And I grew up with eating white bread and a Nutella for breakfast. And understand, like, it has taken so many years for me to reverse the effect all of those substances have had on my body, that it has literally costed me my life. And or or this is an attempt to kind of regain that control back. But we don't think enough about how what we put in our body, how we put it in our body, and what does that mean in the context of not only a couple of years, but what does it mean in 20 years. The accumulative effect of all these substances is very, very dangerous. And I would actually even go so far that I think that on a global scale there should be space to suing a lot of companies for both approving a lot of substances being put in the food, but also for not for lacking regulation within what is done, why it's done, it's how it's done. And I think the people, there should be a civil lawsuit
You're
against a lot of
you're
companies.
saying that companies should be held responsible for the irresponsible choices that they have taken in order to make products that they have made a lot on.
But you know, if there was if it was just blatant irresponsibility, I could have even accepted that, in the sense that
But it is a
you can accept that people are negligent, and then people are maybe not well informed. Like, if somebody if somebody creates a food product that is edible in its essence, whatever that means, um it does it, and it's on the and it is contained within dimensions of what of the recommendations that have been established within the respective age. Of course nobody's going to think about, like, what are the long-term effects. Everybody thinks, like, how can we monetize on this? But I think that's where exactly the place where we can't be naive. We don't have space anymore to be naive about what is happening and why it is happening. So one needs to have a high level of control of substances that one puts in the body. But I do definitely think that a lot of these companies should be held accountable, because it's not that we didn't know. It's not that they didn't know. it is the fact that this has been perpetuated for the sake of profit. And I think a civil lawsuit against large food companies, especially the ones dealing with sodas and a lot of snack products, should happen quite about soon. Because what we're dealing with is a poisoning on a global level.
Like there's a lot of solutions that can be done with this. I personally think that I personally think that there's a lot that has happened, and I think proper non-biased research is the way to go, and legislations based on that research. Very hard to set up, since you basically need to have some people involved in this research where you control most factors. Not gonna go into that, but I think there's many directions that can be taken with this. We already know that there is certain combinations that is just pure unhealthy for humans and are made using addictive properties like refined sugar, caffeine, fat. Fat and sugar is a very good mixture that ticks off all the cravings in the brain. And I think it's not a lot to ask for governments to increase for instance, the taxation both on the companies and on the products, so that it's not only the producer, not only the end user that has to pay for it, because we do have sugar taxes around now, but that is just charging the end user in the end. I think also hitting the companies, and the profit for this should directly go into making organic food available for everyone.
Yes, exactly. So like, so that's kind of, we're going back to Snickels. It's like, haha, Snickels, but it's a bit like, well, this is political, economical, and social issue. So let's speak about it, because
saying it's here to start the conversation.
yes, and I mean, especially this dimension that I'm introducing through this podcast or this short video series, is because all of these topics are loaded with things that I want to talk about. And I'm very, like, I'm just kind of a bit on a side note. Yeah, you know what? I can take this a bit differently, but I think that, again, before I've done this cleanse, which has kind of lasted for a year and a half, which starts with the celery juice in the morning, no foreign substances, a la sodas, no alcohol. I quit smoking. I mean, I started smoking when I was in London, so I didn't smoke for very long, but I quit smoking. No perfume, no acrylic nails. So all of that has kind of gone away, because as my body started to become sensitized to what is just pure normal food, and I have to say that you and me are lucky in the context that we can afford organic food almost completely. Like, we can afford completely organic food, but it is a big it's quite a large amount of money spent on just eating quite cleanly, and it's one of those things that not everybody can afford, and a large amount of people won't be able to afford it. As when you kind of are going towards the families of 4 or 5 people, eating only organic is a very expensive affair. And what we're kind of dealing with here is that I think, obviously segregation according to the political, economical, and social class has always existed. That's not something new. But I think we're kind of reaching this segregation that reminds me of that French cartoon, Gondor. Was it Gondor? I'll find it and I'll put it in the podcast, where we're speaking about 2 different races. The one that has kind of had access to the clean environment, food, resources, and then the other ones that have been poisoned through different means. And obviously we are on the brink of this happening, because the organic food is a division, and it's a division of dimensions that we have not previously thought about. Because one of the reasons, like, there's a lot of things that I've already, one attributes to the temperament. So for example, like me coming from a South European country, I used to be quite exuberant and quite intense personality. However, after I've done the food cleanse, what has become quite apparent for me is that things such as sugar, coffee, they heat up blood system, they heat up the brain. So your ability to navigate situations in a calm, composed, and proficient manner decreases. You become much more overheated. You're much more prone to aggressive outbursts. You're much more prone to these dimensionalities of behavior that do not be that, like, they can work within middle class, obviously, but as soon as you start kind of walking a higher road, they become hyper detrimental, because if you're not being if you don't have ability to contain yourself, well, that's a problem. And if you have this need, if you constantly feel like your energy is lacking, you will end up eating much more, which will again affect your own apprehension of the self, and it will change a lot of parameters. So we're not speaking only, like, food is not only, oh, we should eat healthy, oh, we all know we should eat healthy. We are speaking about something which much larger set of repercussions than I think any of us are actually thinking about.
Yes, we are, and this is what Snickels is introducing. It's this very innocent, funny-looking piece with the first eye, but with a much deeper ties into a much more serious and topic that needs more attention and should be given more attention.
Yes, exactly, because like what we're speaking about is this division between what we're speaking is almost like a new racial division. Who can afford the clean products and the access to the clean environment, than as opposed to somebody who can't. And you have this, you have it's so much mental health that is connected to the food that we're not even aware of. And at the same time, our brains kind of are being prone to choosing foods with high sugar in high in sugar, is also a bit of an evolutionary hack that does not help us entirely. But I think that we need to be aware. We need to be aware that not everything is as it is on the surface. And I think that's what I also love about Snickels, because it's difficult to speak about food without people getting affected, because it directly relates to the body, and the body is, again, it's a evolutionary asset that today is treated in within the same scope as any other stock. We trade our bodies, we trade our aesthetics, we trade our looks. So it's very difficult to discuss this without kind of almost being preachy, which is not what this is about. But I think we do need to address that a lot of things are happening to us because we are not aware of what is happening with the bodies when they're exposed to different things. And you and me have not touched alcohol for a very long time. And I would not recommend that to anyone at all. Like, drinking once a month is fine, but drinking the amounts that I'm observing, like, it's just not evolutionary conducive. So I think that food is very difficult because of this bodily connection that we have, because we feel subjectively attacked as soon as our food habits are
Challenged.
scrutinized. That was the word I was looking for, scrutinized. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't love our bodies. Like, I think one of the most wonderful changes that have happened post-COVID is that, like, this wave of bodily acceptance fueled by Instagram, by TikTok, by just general exposure to different types of bodies, and that a lot of people can be happy without being ultra skinny, especially for the I'm sorry, on the for the female part of the audience I'm speaking about. But And that's what I love about Snickels. It's not perfect. Like you have this dimension of tracing and retracing, of mistakes made and then changed, but then everything done like directly on canvas, so you can see all of those dimensions and all of that information deposited. And it's a bit like with those with our bodies. And I think for people that have grown up in 90s, we have been put under very large pressure of how people are supposed to look. But I think I'm very happy that it's changing now. I just don't never want. I want to. Food is something that I will be speaking about frequently. Um, Out of a lot of dimensions, there was one, I was once like I was looking at the internet and it was a bit funny because it was a canned box of mangoes, and it said on the box, mangoes the highest, the best source of vitamin A, and then you would turn around the can and it was like vitamin A 0%. We need to be aware. We need to be aware of the labels. We need to be aware of what's happening, and we need to be aware of what we're doing, because I don't think people need to be anorexic at all. Like I don't think people need to be ultra skinny to be beautiful, but I think a healthy body and a healthy skin. I think that's what I love. One of those things that I really enjoy about Norway is that, like, when I was in Kristiansand a couple of months ago, I was looking at people and they were not skinny. They weren't ultra skinny. They weren't like Western and Eastern fetishization of starved body. They were normal, healthy women between size small to large, kind of a given where the how body is constructed, whose skin is absolutely glowing, and the hair is gorgeous, and I find that so much more beautiful. So this is not about, like, this podcast is not about a rant against X, Y, and Z. It is actually a rant about the toxic products that we put on our body that kind of hinge our metabolism. Because if something hinges our metabolism and that affects our mood, that will affect every single dimension of the human behavior. And if you think about it, you're one person watching this or two people watching this. Uh, Within your respective compounds. I hope there is more than that, but it becomes very interesting to think about that the same behavior, similar thoughts, similar behavior is repeated or simulated. How many people is there on Earth now? 7 billion? More?
I think 6 point something.
Yeah. When all of the
Probably closing in on 7.
Yeah, when all of those people are doing quite similar choices, and you kind of see how that pans out in different dimensions, and I don't think it's looking very good for us. Just in general, within the evolutionary trajectory, and I think that's quite important to say.
I do agree. So it seems like you want some of the same freedom that has now been that people are enjoying in regards to body types, etc. You want sort of that same thing to happen within the food industry, where more the freedom for the consumer is there to not constantly have to be vigilant about what they eat and what is presented to them, but that there is a larger global focus on that the things being produced and the things being offered is of a healthier variety, where people can actually make choices or have good choices presented to them.
Exactly, because again, this is an issue that will not be tackled from the top down, but it has to be tackled down and upwards.
Unfortunately, it does seem like it, or that seems to have been what has been happening all the time, that it comes from down and up instead of actually being government starting to realize and make big changes.
Exactly. So yes, and there's a very interesting cross section between wealth and food here, because the higher in the hierarchy you come, especially on the female side, you kind of want to start to notice that women are really taking good care of themselves. That means eating a lot of porridge, a lot of grains, well, not a lot, but like ginger shots, etc., 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 juices. And I think there is a very interesting dimension where the food is not fancy anymore, but the food is supposed to be nutritional and healthy. And I think as long as the focus is put there, I think a lot of people would just come much better off by learning how to eat differently, even if it's not organic. But and then we can speak about like change, because how our minds and body reacts to what we put into it, it's nothing new for us, and yet we kind of repeat this hyper detrimental behavior over and over again that ends up biting the lowest social economical classes, or affects them hardest. And I think that's something that is really important to speak about and to address.
I do agree.
Yeah, and with that, I think we're concluding this episode. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And let's speak another time.
Goodbye.
Bye.